Alright, today we're reviewing Borderlands, so I thought that it would be a good idea to give you a feel of what it would be like to visit Pandora. You know, complete chaos, questionable decisions, people panicking, and nobody having any idea of what to do. Then I remembered, I make YouTube videos. I deal with this on a constant basis. Anyways, let's see if Borderlands made the leap from video game to movie. Spoiler alert, Pandora survived. The Rotten Tomato score didn't. Roll the intro. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Big Screen Leap, the show where we take stories from words, pencils, and scripts and see how they land as Hollywood hits. I'm your host, William Redman. Today, we're heading to one of the craziest, loudest, and most explosive franchise in gaming history. Today we're looking at Borderlands, the 2009 game, and comparing it to the 2024 movie starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Cate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, and Jack Black. Now, adapting a game like Borderlands should have been easy, right? Colorful worlds, memorable characters, a psychotic robot that doesn't know how to shut up. Hollywood took a look at all that and said, what if we didn't do any of that? So today, we're going to take a look and see if Borderlands made the leap from video game to movie. Grab your backpack, stock up on ammo, and let's hope that we find some treasure. Let's start it off with the plot. The original Borderlands, released in 2009, drops players into the lawless world of Pandora. There, you have mercenaries, bandits, mutated wildlife, and corporations willing to waste anybody to make a profit. Legend says somewhere on Pandora lies the Vault, an ancient alien chamber rumored to contain unimaginable treasures and technology. So naturally, everybody wants it. When the game starts, players choose one of 4 Vault Hunters. You've got Roland, the Soldier, Lilith, the Siren, Mordecai, the Hunter, and Brick, the Berserker. Unlike many RPGs, all 4 characters experience the same overall story, but with different abilities and playstyles. The opening immediately establishes Pandora as a planet where surviving one day is considered a success. And just to be clear, this isn't the same Pandora from the movie Avatar. In that one, you have beautiful forests, floating mountains, and 10-foot tall blue people. On this one, you have psychos trying to murder you because you have a shotgun that shoots faster than theirs. James Cameron would only last about 6 minutes on this planet. Players arrive in the town of Firestone, spelled with a Y because... cool. Here they meet Dr. Zed, who patches them up after being attacked almost immediately. Not exactly the warmest welcome. Throughout the adventure, players work with a mysterious woman known only as the Guardian Angel, who communicates through visions and guides you towards finding pieces of the Vault Key. The game quickly becomes a mixture of bounty hunting, fighting bandits, helping survivors, and battling corporate mercenaries, and collecting absurd amounts of guns. And when I say absurd, I don't mean that lightly. One of the things that made Borderlands so successful was that they advertised millions of different weapon combinations possible in the game. Every few minutes, you're replacing your shotgun because you found another shotgun that somehow shoots electricity while also producing exploding acid. The major villain of the game is Commandant Steele, leader of the Atlas Corporation's Crimson Lance soldiers. Atlas wants complete control over Pandora and the Vault, believing whatever lies inside will make them unstoppable. As players travel across Pandora, they uncover ruins of the Iridians, the ancient and supposedly extinct race of aliens from Pandora. Ancient alien technology, and clues suggest that the vault may not actually be full of treasure. Eventually, the vault key is assembled, but Steele reaches the vault first. Unfortunately for her, opening it releases the Destroyer, a gigantic interdimensional alien monster that has been imprisoned inside. It turns out, the vault wasn't a treasure chest, it was actually a prison for something much more dangerous. The 4 Vault Hunters battled the Destroyer in an enormous boss fight. After defeating it, the creature is forced back into the vault. Then, the Guardian Angel reveals the truth. She manipulated everyone into preventing an even greater catastrophe, and hints that many vaults exist throughout the galaxy. The ending isn't necessarily about becoming rich. Instead, it sets up an even larger universe, one that Borderlands 2 would massively expand. Yeah. Instead of telling you, hey, the vault's dangerous, don't open it, the Guardian Angel uses the parenting method of letting you touch the hot stove, hoping you won't do it again. Good thing it worked. Kind of. The 2024 movie tells a completely different story. Rather than retelling from the first game, it takes characters and ideas from all the Borderlands games and drops them into one plot. So now, I know what you're thinking. If that's the case, why am I not reviewing all the Borderlands games? Well, there's a logical explanation for that. I have a life. Seriously, do you know how long these games are? If I were to review Borderlands, Borderlands 2, Borderlands the pre-sequel, and Borderlands 3, by the time this episode was done, Borderlands 8 would probably be out by now. The story follows Lilith, played by Cate Blanchett, now a bounty hunter hired by Atlas. Not the corporation from the game, but instead the person, played by Edgar Ramirez, to locate his missing daughter, Tiny Tina, from Borderlands 2, played by Ariana Greenblatt, who has escaped with a soldier named Roland, played by Kevin Hart. Because when you think of Roland from the game, oh yeah, you totally think of Kevin Hart. Lilith reluctantly returns to Pandora, a planet she desperately wanted to leave behind. She soon encounters several familiar faces, including Roland and Tiny Tina. You've got Krieg, who appeared in Borderlands 2 and is played by Florian Munteanu. Tannis, who is from the first game but wasn't a playable character. She's played by Jamie Lee Curtis. And then the robot Claptrap, who is also a non-playable character from the first game, who is voiced by Jack Black. Eventually, the unlikely group teams up, despite constantly arguing with one another. The central mystery revolves around Tina. Atlas believes she possesses the ability to open an ancient vault. Yeah, instead of hunting for different parts of a key, they only have to find one key, and then hope Tiny Tina can open the vault. Throughout the journey, the heroes battle Atlas soldiers, bandits, and Pandora's dangerous wildlife while searching for the vault. We then find out that it actually isn't Tina who holds the power to opening the vault. Instead, it's Lilith. The film slowly reveals that Lilith herself has a deeper connection to Pandora than she realized. She is actually tied to the ancient Iridian civilization and has powers that make her essential to opening the vault. The final climax sees our heroes battling with Atlas, with Lilith opening the vault in an attempt to save Tina. She, Atlas, and Tina discover that the vault does contain advanced Iridian technology, but also something much darker. Lilith and Tiny Tina escape the vault, leaving Atlas, who gets dragged away by the alien within the vault. Our movie ends with our hero celebrating being rid of Atlas and his cronies. Unlike the game, the movie focuses much more on family, destiny, and teamwork rather than treasure hunting and corporate greed. But was that the right move? Before we talk about that, we have to talk about the game production. The production of Borderlands is almost as interesting as the game itself. At one point, it looked like a completely different experience. After finding success with games like Half-Life Opposing Forces, Brothers in Arms, and several licensed titles, Gearbox Software wanted to create an original franchise they could truly call their own. Publishers 2K Games came on board, and development on Borderlands began in the mid-2000s. The team's goal was ambitious: combine the addictive progression and loot system of role-playing games like Diablo with the fast-paced first-person shooting of games like Halo. At the time, that wasn't something many games had attempted on this scale. Nowadays we call those games looter shooters, but back then, Borderlands was helping to define what the genre would become. One of the biggest turning points during development came fairly late in the production. Early versions of Borderlands featured a much more realistic visual style. If you look up early screenshots today, the game almost resembles something like Fallout 3 mixed with Mad Max. It looked gritty, brown, and honestly, kind of generic. Gearbox realized it didn't stand out, so they made a bold decision. They completely overhauled the art direction, adopting the now iconic cel-shaded, comic book-inspired look. You had thick black outlines, exaggerated colors, and hand-drawn textures gave Borderlands an identity unlike anything else on store shelves in 2009. It was a risky move because changing an entire game's visual style late in development is expensive and time-consuming, but in hindsight, it became one of the smartest decisions the studio ever made. Even today, 17 years later, Borderlands is still recognizable because of its unique style. But still, the thing that probably pushed it over the threshold was its weapons system. Rather than hand designing every gun, Gearbox built a system where weapons were assembled from interchangeable parts. Different manufacturers in the game specialized in different strengths. Each gun could have different barrels, scopes, magazines, stocks, elemental effects, damage values, and firing behaviors. The result? Millions of possible weapon combinations. It wasn't just a marketing gimmick either. Every time you opened a chest or defeated a boss, there was genuine excitement because you never knew what incredible or hilarious useless weapon you might find. And part of the excitement too was the fact that Borderlands was 4-player co-op. While the game could absolutely be enjoyed solo, everything became even more entertaining with friends. By 2009, multiplayer gaming had already taken off, but the idea of playing the story together in a game, rather than playing the multiplayer battle experience, was something not really heard of until Borderlands came along. Players constantly compared weapons, shared loot, revived one another during firefights, and accidentally stole each other's legendary drops. Okay, that last one probably caused a few arguments, but still, Borderlands' design helped establish it as one of the greatest multiplayer shooters of the era. Borderlands launched on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC in October of 2009. Critics praised the addictive loot progression, cooperative gameplay, unique visual style, RPG mechanics, and replayability. Some criticism was aimed at repetitive mission structures and a somewhat thin main story, but most agreed that the gameplay loop was incredibly satisfying. The game was a major success and eventually led to Borderlands 2, widely considered the best in the series, Borderlands the pre-sequel, Borderlands 3, novels, comics, merch, and eventually, the movie we're talking about today. Looking back, it's easy to see why Borderlands was successful. It didn't create first-person shooters, it didn't create RPGs, but what it did was put them together to make something fresh, addictive, and uniquely their own. Years later, multiple other games would try to copy it, and in my opinion, that's probably the biggest form of a compliment. Turning Borderlands into a Hollywood movie sounds like a no-brainer. So how did it become one of the most critical and commercial disappointments of 2024? Well, the road to Pandora was a bit of a bumpy one. Talks of a Borderlands movie began years before cameras even started rolling. With the success of the games, especially Borderlands 2, Hollywood saw the franchise as a potential blockbuster. The challenge, though, was figuring out how to adapt it. Do you faithfully retell the story of the first game? Do you adapt the more successful second game and introduce Handsome Jack to cinema? Or do you create an original story? The filmmakers ultimately chose the third option, creating a new adventure that borrowed characters and ideas from across multiple games instead of adapting any single one. To put into perspective how weird the character lineup in Borderlands is, imagine if Hollywood adapted the Lord of the Rings trilogy into one movie. But instead of adapting the Fellowship of the Ring, they just started grabbing characters they liked. So our main hero is Frodo, okay, that makes sense. But his traveling companions are Éowyn, Treebeard, Faramir, Gollum, and the Witch King of Angmar. Wait, what? And then somehow Denethor is the comic relief. Gandalf's here, except he's already Gandalf the White, even though Frodo hasn't left the Shire yet. Aragorn? Not in the movie. Legolas? Nope. Gimli? Gone. But don't worry, it gets better, because halfway through the movie, Smaug shows up. Wait, wasn't he from The Hobbit? Yeah, don't worry about it. So now Frodo, Éowyn, Faramir, Treebeard, Gollum, Gandalf the White, the Witch King, and Smaug all pile into a wagon and head towards Mount Doom. And if you're a Lord of the Rings fan and you're watching that movie, you're probably going, I know all these characters! Why are they together? That is what Borderlands did. It's not that these characters don't belong in the universe, it's just that sometimes recognizable characters don't necessarily make a coherent adaptation. The project was directed by Eli Roth, best known for horror films like Hostel and Cabin Fever. At first glance, Roth actually seemed like an interesting choice. Borderlands is violent, chaotic, and doesn't take itself too seriously, qualities that fit some of his previous work. However, the finished film ended up being much tamer than many fans expected. Instead of leaning into the franchise's mature, over-the-top violence and dark humor, the movie aimed for a broader audience with a PG-13 rating, leaving many longtime fans upset because they felt that this toned-down approach stripped away part of what made Borderlands unique. Another issue fans had with the production was the casting. We already went over who was what in the movie, but the biggest complaints were the choices for some of them. Lilith, played by Cate Blanchett, was one of those casting complaints. Don't get me wrong, Blanchett is a great actress, and she did her best in the movie, but a lot of people were upset because she was an actress in her mid-50s who was cast to play a character that was much younger in the games. The other upsetting casting choice was Kevin Hart for Roland. In the game, Roland is known as the serious, disciplined soldier of the group. If you've watched most Kevin Hart movies, serious and discipline aren't things that come to mind with his roles. Surprisingly, the casting that was praised was Jack Black as Claptrap. His delivery captured the essence of the annoying but lovable robot. Principal photography began in 2021, with much of the production taking place in Hungary. The filmmakers relied heavily on practical sets, combined with visual effects to recreate the world of Pandora. The costume department also made a noticeable effort to bring many of the game's iconic character designs to life. Lilith's outfit, Krieg's mask, Tiny Tina's goggles, and Claptrap's designs were all recognizable to longtime fans. Visually, the movie looked like Borderlands. Unfortunately, it had a problem feeling like Borderlands, and part of that was because of the reshoots. Reshoots in Hollywood is something that is fairly common practice, but one of the reasons this became an issue is because director Eli Roth was unavailable due to commitments on another project. As a result, director Tim Miller, known for Deadpool and Terminator Dark Fate, was brought in to oversee the additional filming. Now to be clear, Tim Miller didn't take over as the director. Eli Roth still got the directing credits. Still, when another major director has to come in and film your reshoots, it kinda makes it look like the studio wasn't happy with the original shoots in the first place. Borderlands was released in August of 2024. Unfortunately, the response was overwhelmingly negative. Critics praised a few individual performances, particularly Jack Black's voice work and Cate Blanchett's commitment, but most reviews criticized the film for a weak screenplay, inconsistent humor, generic action, underdeveloped characters, and overall failing to capture the spirit of the game. One of the biggest complaints by fans is that they felt that the movie didn't capture what made Borderlands so special. Instead of embracing the wild chaos, a lot of people felt like they played it safe. Despite people's complaints, and don't worry, we'll get to those here in a minute, the filmmakers didn't completely ignore the source material. What they did instead was take bits and pieces from different parts of games and put them into the movie without really understanding what made them memorable. Still though, we have to give credit where credit's due. The biggest success of the movie is probably its visual recreation of Pandora. If you've played the games, you'll immediately recognize the dusty deserts, abandoned industrial complexes, rusted out settlements, and junk-covered landscapes. Pandora has always looked like a planet where civilization tried to settle, failed miserably, and then everyone who did survive lost their minds. The movie captures the aesthetic surprisingly well. Next, just like the original game, the entire story revolves around finding the vault. In both versions, the vault isn't just a random treasure chest. It's an ancient Iridian structure connected to mysterious alien technology and hidden somewhere on Pandora. And in each vault is something that our heroes weren't quite expecting. Speaking of Iridians and their technology, the ancient civilization still remains one of the franchise's biggest mysteries. Both the game and the movie establish that the Iridians were an incredibly advanced alien race, they left behind powerful tech, their ruins are scattered throughout Pandora, and their knowledge is tied directly to the vault. Even though the movie changes some of the mythology, it still keeps the Iridians as an important part of the universe instead of replacing them with an entirely new concept. Finally, at their core, both the game and the movie are about assembling an unlikely group of heroes and sending them on a dangerous journey across Pandora in search of an ancient mystery. Along the way, they battle bandits, discover alien secrets, uncover conspiracies, survive impossible odds, and slowly become a team. The basic adventure framework is something both versions share. Even if the details are completely different, the movie understands that Borderlands is ultimately about ordinary people, or at least ordinary by Pandora standards, getting swept into something much bigger than themselves. So when you take a step back, you can clearly understand that this was made by people who understood what Borderlands was. The pieces were there, but adaptations aren't measured by what pieces are put in. Instead, it's measured by what those pieces do. The ingredients were there, but the recipe was completely changed. And now we get to the part that's made Borderlands one of the most talked about video game movie adaptations in a long time. And not in a good way. As I've said before, video games and movies are completely different mediums, so obviously you're gonna have to change some things. But with Borderlands, they changed quite a bit. The biggest change, and honestly the one that affects everything else, is that the movie does not adapt the story of the original Borderlands game. The first game follows 4 vault hunters arriving independently on Pandora after hearing rumors of an ancient vault full of treasures. The movie, for the most part, throws that away. Instead, it creates an original plot centered around Atlas hiring Lilith to rescue Tiny Tina, who supposedly holds the key to opening the vault. As the story progresses, Lilith discovers she has a mysterious connection to Pandora and becomes the central figure in an ancient prophecy. That's a very different story. Rather than being about treasure hunters chasing fortune, it becomes more of a chosen one adventure. Neither approach is automatically bad, but if you went into theaters expecting the events of the first game, you probably thought you bought tickets to the wrong movie. The next difference, and probably the biggest issue with fans, is that the movie doesn't adapt just one Borderlands game. It borrows characters from multiple games and places them together as if they've always existed at the same time. I already addressed why this was such an issue with my Lord of the Rings example. Let's not get back into it. Let's just move on. The next difference is that the characters from the movie are much different from their video game counterparts. Lilith is made the main character in the movie, where in the game, she was one of 4 main characters. In the game, she's already an experienced siren, she's powerful, mysterious, but she's not the center of the universe. She's one member of the team. The movie turns her into the emotional core of the entire story. Her connections to Pandora become much deeper, and she's tied directly to the vault itself. Instead of one capable hero among equals, she becomes the franchise's chosen savior. Roland in the game is calm, disciplined, professional, and very much the military leader of the group. The movie's Roland is considerably more relaxed. Kevin Hart surprisingly plays the role much straighter than many people expected, but the character still lacks the commanding military presence that defined him in the games. Tiny Tina in the games is known as complete chaos in human form. She loves explosives, she talks a mile a minute, she's unpredictable. Half the time you're not entirely sure if she's a genius or completely insane. Usually, she's both. The movie tones her down considerably. She's still quirky and energetic, but much of the unhinged personality that made her such a fan favorite is missing. The filmmakers, for whatever reason, removed a lot of what made Tiny Tina... well, Tiny Tina. Next, the loot takes a backseat in the movie. One of the most addictive parts of the game is finding better weapons. You're constantly opening loot chests, trying to find legendary guns, and experimenting with different weapon models. Naturally, a movie can't spend 20 minutes comparing weapon stats, but the movie barely emphasizes loot hunting at all. Instead, it focuses entirely on the characters and the vault. Finally, the tone between the game and the movie are completely different. One of Borderlands' defining traits has always been its willingness to embrace complete insanity. The games are violent, ridiculous, darkly funny, sometimes horrifying, sometimes genuinely emotional, and all of that can happen within 5 minutes of the game. The movie feels much more restrained. The violence is toned down, the language is softer, the comedy is more conventional. Instead of feeling dangerous, Pandora often feels like a fairly standard science fiction setting. For a franchise known for absolute chaos, that's a noticeable shift. Now, when you look at these changes individually, none of them sound disastrous. The problem was the Borderlands movie made all those changes all at once, so when you got done with the movie, it felt like a completely different experience from what you experienced with the game. So after spending all this time looking at the game and the movie, I think the biggest question I have is, who was this movie made for? Because if you're already a Borderlands fan, there are probably going to be a lot of moments where you're sitting there wondering why they changed something that didn't need to be changed. But if you never played Borderlands before, I'm not sure this movie does enough to make you understand why this franchise became so popular in the first place. And that's where I think the movie really struggles. I don't need a video game movie to recreate every mission, every character, and every line of dialogue. In fact, I don't really want that. If I wanted the exact same experience, I'd just play the game again. Make changes, surprise me, give me something new. But whatever you change, you still have to give me a reason to care about this version of the story. And I just never got there with Borderlands. There are things I enjoyed. I think the cast is clearly trying. There are some fun moments, and occasionally, I could see the Borderlands movie I wanted to see try to break through. Unfortunately, it never really gets there. And that's especially disappointing, because we're living in an era where video game adaptations are finally proving that they don't have to be terrible. We've seen enough good ones that the, well, video game movies are always bad excuse really isn't an excuse anymore. Borderlands had a chance to join that group. Instead, I think we're going to look back at this as another example of Hollywood having a successful video game franchise in its hands and not really knowing what to do with it. So unfortunately for me, the leap was not worth it. And it's a shame, because I think there's a great Borderlands movie out there waiting to be made. This just wasn't it. But that's all the time that we have for today. Which version of Borderlands do you enjoy, the game or the movie? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and ringing that notification bell so you're notified next time we post a video. Until next time, from page to screen and everything in between, this has been the Big Screen Leap. And remember, when you open up loot boxes, sometimes you get legendary weapons, other times you get the Borderlands movie. Bye everyone!